Hi everyone, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. So today we are going to be going through my progress update for the 2023 Reddit Fantasy Bingo card. So if this is not something that you're familiar with, I am going to have the link to the original bingo card post down in the description so that you can check it out if you want. But I'm in no way affiliated with r/fantasy on Reddit or anything like that. This is just something that I've been doing ever since I discovered it in 2021 because I think it's really cool to look at these prompts that are on their bingo board and try to kind of fit in books that are already on my TBR, but it might give me a reason to read them, and it's just kind of fun to complete a challenge. So usually what I'll do for this is I'm not going completely out on a limb and filling the bingo card with books that I've never heard of or anything. I really kind of make it a challenge for myself almost to read my existing TBR, and I think it's a really great way for me to do that as well. So this bingo card is like your classic 5x5. It has 25 squares on it, and so I'm gonna go through row by row and tell you about each prompt and then tell you what I've either read for it or what I plan to read for it, or even if I'm at some point asking for recommendations for it. So the very first square that we have is called Title with a Title, which basically means read a book in which the title of the book contains a job title, military title, title of nobility, etc. And so the hard mode for this is that it's not a title of royalty. And I'll say right off the bat that I don't tend to focus on whether I'm hitting the hard mode for something. I just want to fill the prompt, and then if it does fit hard mode, that's more of a bonus than anything. So the book that I have chosen for Title with a Title is The Hexologists by Josiah Bancroft, because the hexologists in the book is like the proprietary title of our main characters who are a married couple, and basically like the title of their business, and they call themselves the hexologists. So this does fit for hard mode, which is nice. And then the next square is superheroes, which means that the story focuses on superpowered individuals, heroes, villains, and capes. And the hard mode is that it's not related to DC or Marvel. So for this one, I have not actually read anything for this square yet, but the one that I have in there is Vicious by B.E. Schwab. And then the third square is bottom of the TBR. Read one of the books that's been on your to be read pile for the longest. If you don't keep a TBR, read one of the books that you've been meaning to read for the longest time. There's no hard mode for this one also. So the one that I have put down for bottom of the TBR is A Court of Thorns and Roses, actually, by Sarah J. Maas, because although I haven't actually owned this book for as long as I've owned some other books, it is a book that has been on my radar forever, ever since it came out 8 years ago. So I think that counts, because in terms of books that I've been aware of for the longest, that definitely fits the bill. Way before I knew that BookTube even existed, I knew about A Court of Thorns and Roses. So that's why I've chosen that one. The fourth square on the card is magical realism or literary fantasy. Read a book that portrays magical or unreal elements in an otherwise realistic or mundane environment. I'm a big fan of magical realism, even though I know it's kind of wishy-washy and hard to sometimes pin down an actual definition for magical realism. And so the hard mode for this is not one of the 30 books that they have in their linked thread, and I honestly don't have any idea whether Bunny by Mona Awad is in their linked thread. I guess I could just quickly check right now, but Bunny is the one that I have written down for this one because I think that it very much fits the bill in terms of being a speculative book that treats a lot of the odd and more surreal happenings in the book as part of something that the main character considers normal or thinks is real or doesn't really recognize as being strange, even though it is very, very strange. So I definitely feel like Bunny, just based on the vibes, fits for this square. And then for the next square, the last one in that top row, we have young adult. Read a book that was written for young adults, and the hard mode is that it was published in the last 5 years. And so to be completely honest with you, I don't think I've read a single young adult book this year ever since April when the card started. So I don't actually have one to fill this yet, but the one that I have slotted in there is Blade of Secrets by Trisha Levenseller, because that is on my shelf and that is something that I've been like excited for since I bought it, and it does seem like a kind of fun and easy read, so maybe I'll be able to fit that in before, I mean, for some reason my brain thinks, oh, before the end of the year, but you actually have until March because the card goes from April 1st until the following March 31st. So there's actually a lot more time than that, than like just the rest of November and December. But with that said, we move on to the second row. So the first one in this row is mundane jobs, which means that the protagonist has a commonplace job that can be found in the real world. And the hard mode is that the book does not take place on Earth. So it is a completely secondary world, and yet the character still has a mundane job. I didn't hit the hard mode for this one just because I have chosen The X Hex by Erin Sterling, because the protagonist is a teacher or like a college professor, which obviously is a completely normal job. However, with that said, like, it's a rom-com book that takes place on Earth with witches. So, you know, does in fact take place on Earth, but that is okay. Next one up is published in the 2000s, between 2000 and 2009. And then the hard mode is that it's not in the top 30 of the r/Fantasy's best of 2023 list. And so the book that I chose is Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie, which is number 3. Oh, they have the entire First Law world listed. I thought maybe I could slide under the radar if it was like individual books, but no, they have the entire First Law world listed third. So that definitely doesn't fit the hard mode. However, I think it might be, I would have to check on this, but it might be the only book I've read that is published in the 2000s. So it still fits the square. Now, next up is one that I have a little bit of trouble with, which is Angels and Demons. Story must feature angels or demons or both in a prominent role, and the hard mode is that the protagonist is an angel or a demon. And so I know that a lot of people would read Good Omens for this square, but I read that a few years ago, and the one that I actually have in there right now for this is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. But if you'll remember, I also had Vicious down for Heroes and Villains, and you're only allowed like one book per author on a square. So if I came up with something different for Heroes and Villains, I could reread The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue for this square because I know it features like a demon or a devil. But I really don't know what I'm going to do with that one. So if anybody has any recommendations for Angels and Demons, I would very much appreciate that. The next square up is 5 SFF short stories. Any short story as long as there are 5 of them, and then hard mode is to read an entire anthology or collection. So right now, the one that I have in there is The River of Silver by S.A. Chakraborty, because that is the short story collection that is in the same universe as her Daevabad trilogy, which I read earlier this year and absolutely adored. So I'm really, really excited to get to those short stories and to just like experience more tidbits of that world. So I definitely plan to read that one. And then next up, we have a square that is simply called Horror. Read a book from the horror genre. The hard mode is that it's not Stephen King or H.P. Lovecraft. So this one has a few possibilities here. Currently, I have Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead down for this, but I could easily also put, like, for example, The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas in there. There are a few other horror books that I've read, like Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wabgashig Rice. Like, I have read a few horror books. I just decided to put Midnight is the Darkest Hour in there because why not? And then, oh, you know what I just realized? Crap. Is that for the short story collection? I already have one of the Daevabad books on here. So I think that there might be a rule about repeating an author if it's for the short stories, but then it might not apply if you have an entire collection by that author. So we'll see. I'll have to probably change my plans for the short stories. Man, I don't know how I didn't notice that. That's very disappointing. But with that said, we'll move on to the third row, which is where I noticed this happening. So the first book here is self-published or indie published. And then if the novel has been picked up by a publisher, it only counts for this if you read it when it was still self-published. And the hard mode is that it has fewer than 100 ratings on Goodreads. So I could maybe end up putting one of the Spiffbo books on here if it ends up having fewer than 100 ratings by the time I read them. But right now I have The 13th Hour, which is the Cruel Gods series by Trudy Skies. That is the one that I currently have in here, and I'm fairly certain that that has well over 100 ratings at this point. But then the next square is set in the Middle East or Middle Eastern sci-fi fantasy. So this is the one for which I have The Kingdom of Copper from the David Benn trilogy. So yeah. I don't think I've read anything else set in the Middle East either, but I'm not sure. Unless there's an analogous one that I'm just not thinking of. But yeah, I'll have to do a little bit of shuffling there because I won't be able to use The River of Silver, which is disappointing. But I do have another short story collection that I could use. So I'll have to circle back to that. The next square, halfway through the card, is published in 2023, a book published for the first time this year, and the hard mode is that it's also a debut novel. So I don't believe that I'm gonna hit the hard mode for this one, even if I look at the other 2023 releases that I've read, but the one that I have in there for this is Blade of Dream by Daniel Abraham, which is the second book in the Kithamar trilogy. I really loved Blade of Dream when I read it, and so if you haven't stepped into like Daniel Abraham and tried him out, I would definitely recommend the Long Price Quartet, but I've been really happy with how the Kithamar trilogy is going so far as well, since I've been eager to pick up anything else that he publishes. Then the next square up is Multiverses and Alternate Realities. Read a book in which the setting contains at least 2 universes, dimensions, planes, realities, etc. that the characters within the book can travel between. Multiple worlds in the same physical plane of existence, such as planets within a universe, would not count for this square. The hard mode is that characters do not walk through a literal door in order to get to another world. So the one that I have down for Multiverses is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Motar and Max Gladstone, and I definitely think that this counts for hard mode because this is very like wishy-washy, surreal, unclear, like about the time hopping and the different worlds and universes that they can access, and there's definitely different planes of realities when you talk about like the 2 sides of the time war and where they kind of make their home. It almost seems kind of like outside of time, and it's very, very interesting. Definitely got some multiverse going on there. Then next up, we have the POC author, so author must be a person of color. The hard mode is that the novel takes place in a futuristic sci-fi world, but oh yeah, sorry, there's just a note that says that this is going to be a yearly square, but the hard mode will change every year to keep it exciting. So that doesn't specifically apply to this year, that's just a note. So the book that I have down for this square is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez, and this was a fascinating and like extremely well-crafted book. I would definitely recommend this to people who like sort of like a non-classic narrative structure and anything experimental in their books. I just thought that everything that he did with it was really original, and it was a great kind of like just reading experience, and the story was really great too, but I just think that it's such an individual and unique novel that it deserves some recognition for that. Then in the 4th row, the next square is the book club or read-along book. So this is one where I pretty much accept that I will never hit the hard mode, because this square basically accounts for any past or active r/fantasy book club picks, and there is a full list of books on their Goodreads, and they have like a Goodreads shelf that has every single book they've done for a read-along or a book club. And the hard mode is that you must read a current selection and actively like participate. And since I am not like a mood reader like that, I have never really had the desire to like kind of drop what I plan to read and then like read a current selection. So I know I won't hit the hard mode for that. But the book that I have selected for this square is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, which I read recently and adored. And I was really, really happy to see it on their book club list as a past pick, because I really wasn't sure entirely what I was going to use for this square, and then it just so happened that that one is on there, so we love that. Then next up, the next square is a novella. Read a work of fiction between 17,500 and 40,000 words, and the hard mode is that the novella is not published by Tor.com Publishing. So for this one, I actually have The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince by Robin Hobb. Tor.com Publishing, I'm not entirely sure like what that imprint is, because obviously Tor.com is like an online presence, but then Tor.com I believe also publishes physical works as well. But regardless, all of the Robin Hobb that I own, let me just confirm, it's all published by Harper Voyager, so like whatever Tor.com does that I'm unclear on, they're not publishing Robin Hobb's books, so we're fine. So that one does hit the hard mode. Next up, we have Mythical Beasts. Read a book that prominently features at least one mythical beast, meaning a creature that doesn't exist in reality. And the hard mode is that there are no dragons or dragon-like creatures. I mean, it doesn't mean that there are no dragons in the book, it just means that that's not the like creature that you're determining the square based on. So the book that I have down for this is The Memory of Souls by Jen Lyons. And so the Chorus of Dragons series absolutely does feature dragons in it, but there are also a host of other mythical beasts, namely ones that are really memorable to me are these sea creatures, and other, like there are a few different types of sea creatures, but there are these particular type of creature that is sort of almost like a giant kraken, and they're very scary, and they're very like, do not mess with me. And I really thought that it was cool, the inclusion of those and their use throughout the story. So love that, definitely a mythical beast. Then next up we have elemental magic. The primary magic within the world deals with the classical elements, earth, wind/air, water, and fire. And the hard mode is that it's not B.E. Schwab's Shades of Magic or Jim Butcher's Codex Alera. So the book that I have down for this is actually The Counselor by E.J. Beaton. I did a little bit of shifting around, because originally I had The Counselor down for title with a title, but then I realized that it fit much better into the elemental magic category, because that is indeed the magic system in the book, and there is a little bit of a bonus like magic that people can have, where the magic users in the book are in fact called elementals, but they also, some of them can have like an extra power that has to do with some sort of like power to do with the mind rather than just the elements. However, the main magic system does deal with those 4 elements in that book. Then next up, the 20th square and the last one in row 4 is myths and retellings. So read a book that is based on a myth or pre-existing story, and the hard mode is that it is not Greek or Roman mythology. So the one that I've chosen to put down for this is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, which is heavily inspired by like Chinese dynasty and historical, like it's almost like historical fiction, but it very much has, it's historical fantasy. It's not like real world, it is very much fantastical, and the part that really puts it over the edge for me into applying to myths and retellings is the fact that we definitely get to see like the gods, and they're not exactly like a lot of their influence, but it's sprinkled throughout the book, and we definitely get to see the fact that they would be the subject of many myths. So they exist in that book, and it applies to that square. Then we are in the final row, ready to get into the home stretch here. So the first square on this row is Queer Norm Setting, a book set in a world where queerness is normalized, accepted, and prevalent within communities. Characters are not othered, ostracized, or particularly remarkable in any way for their queerness. And the hard mode is that it's not a futuristic setting. It takes place in a time akin to ours in the past, or in a fantasy world that has no science fiction elements. So the book that I have down for Queer Norm Setting is Labyrinth's Heart by M.A. Carrick, which is the final book in the Rook and Rose trilogy, and it very much is like, I don't know if it's a time akin to ours or in the past, but it definitely has no like set anchor in time. Like, it's not futuristic. It very much just is a secondary fantasy world. And if anything, I would say based on the level of technology, it's in the past. However, there is some very interesting technology that specifically uses like the magic system. So it's hard to pinpoint it to an exact point in time. But my point is that this one definitely does fit for hard mode. And then next up, we have a coastal or island setting where the story features a major setting that is near or surrounded by the sea. And the hard mode is that the book also features seafaring. So this was a pretty easy one for me based on the books that I've read this year. There was a clear choice, which is The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. And this is a book that I read earlier this year. I think I read it in April, so shortly after the bingo card was announced. And this is just an easy choice because not only does it take place on like islands and stuff, but a major part of the book is just on a ship. So it fits for both. It fits for hard mode, and I just immediately thought of it and put it there. Now, next up, we have Druids, a book that heavily features druids. This can be a classic druid, a priest, or a magician in Celtic lore, or a magic user whose powers stem from nature. And the hard mode is that it's not the Iron Druid Chronicles by Kevin Hearn. So for this one, I have The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri, and this square is something that I was quite apprehensive about, just because I was like, I don't really know what a druid is. Like, I know it kind of describes it there, but I haven't read any books knowingly that really feature druids. And when I was thinking about books on my TBR, I'm like, well, Jesus, like, I don't know if any of these have druids. But when I read The Jasmine Throne, and I think I saw it in a couple of the recommendation threads, I realized that when you talk about like the powers stemming from nature and stuff like that, it seems like there are some overlap here with this one and the elemental magic square, but at the same time, like, I definitely do think that the Jasmine Throne is a good fit for the druid category, and definitely a better fit here than the counselor would be. So, and if it's hard mode, because it's not the Iron Druid Chronicles, so we love that. Then the 24th square on the card is called Featuring Robots. Read a book that features robots, androids, clockwork machines, or automatons, and the hard mode is that the robot is the protagonist. So I just say that so that you get an idea of what's actually on the card, but one thing that you can do, and that I have actually chosen to do for this, is you can substitute one square each year. Like, if there's a square that you just don't like or whatever, which this one for me, I just don't think I'm gonna read really any books that feature robots. So what I decided to do was I substituted this square with the square from 2022 that is called Name in the Title, which basically just means that the title of a book features the name of the character, and the hard mode is that it features the full name of the character. And I don't know if you can see where I'm going with this, but the book that I chose for this square is The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch, because what a great title. I love that, and it obviously features Loch Lamora's full name, so it works for the hard mode of that one. Now, the final square on the bingo card is called Sequel. Read a book that is a sequel to another SFF book, and the hard mode for this is that it is book 3 or further in the series. Now, the tough part about this is that a lot of the books that I've included on this are parts of series, and that means that when I've been reading in a series, a lot of the books that I've read over the course of the year have repeat authors, obviously. So I can't use those because you can't repeat an author. So one I currently have slotted in for this is A Dance with Dragons by George R.R. Martin, but I will not be reading that because I stopped after A Storm of Swords on this reread. However, I'm sure that at some point I'm going to read something that fits for this. I will, I'll read something in a series somewhere where I'll read the second book of it. And I think I can make it work. I really don't know what my plans are for this square, but I view this one as a little bit easier than some others, so I'll find something to make it work. So there you have it. I will put up here my sort of current up-to-date Canva version of the bingo card, just so that you can see everything that I just talked about and get an overall visual. But yeah, like I said, I just think this is fun. I really love looking at these prompts, finding books that will fill them, and then inevitably not reading those, and then when I look back at what I've actually read throughout the year, trying to find other books that I've read that will fill the prompts, because my plans always go awry. But the important part is that I'm having fun reading, which I nearly always am. So I really hope you enjoyed this, and if you're doing the bingo card as well, please do let me know what your progress is like, or if you have any recommendations for any of these squares, definitely let me know about that as well, and I would love to hear how you're doing with it. So that is it for this video. Please like if you liked it, subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. As always, I'll have my Discord and socials linked in the description if you're interested, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!